Who is this person buried in an old Georgia graveyard? No last name, no date of death. Who is she? Well, it just so happens that she's my first cousin, twice removed. In other words, Daisy is the daughter of my great-great-grandmother. Yeah, that's what it says, but I'm not so sure I understand it. Anyway, I'm going to tell her story as best I can. Let's pick up this story in 1860. Christopher Columbus Bradberry and his young wife, Marietta Bradberry, were living in Watkinsville, Georgia, where they had a farm and 4 children, all girls. But in 1863, Christopher Columbus Bradberry died. That's pretty bad, but not only that, his first name and his middle name were reversed on his grave marker. Marietta Bradberry was left to take care of the farm and her family, which now includes another daughter, Carrie. This legal notice appeared in a local newspaper in 1869. From the looks of this, Marietta Bradberry sold all of their land and headed west. 87 miles to California. No, not that California, but this California, Georgia, just a few miles northwest of Atlanta. Not long after that, the family moved a few miles east to Marietta, Georgia. Marietta Bradberry moved to Marietta, Georgia. And this is where we first find out about Daisy. If you look at this page from an old family Bible, you'll see the entire Bradberry family: Christopher, Marietta, Vandelia, Mary, Martha, Josie, Carrie, and at the bottom, Daisy. Daisy May Bradberry, born July 21st, 1879. And just to affirm that, her gravestone also says she was born in 1879. But here's a little bit of a mystery. We don't hear another word about Daisy for the next 20 years. So who is Daisy? Who is her mother? Who is her father? If you look at the 1880 census, the 1-year-old Daisy just isn't there. You see Marietta and you see her 2 daughters, Josie and Carrie. But Daisy, almost 1 year old, doesn't appear on the 1880 census. And of course, we can't find her on the 1890 census because it doesn't exist. It was destroyed by fire. She finally appears on the 1900 census, with Marietta, the head of the household, Marietta's daughter, Josie, and Josie's daughter, Daisy. This portrait was made around 1900 when Daisy was around 18 or 19 years old. The photographer, David Warlick, had a studio in Marietta about that time. The reverse side, shown on the right, bears an inscription telling us, again, that Daisy was born in 1879. And here they are, mother and daughter, Josie on the left and Daisy standing next to her. Around 1898, we have this great photo of the family, but now it's a much smaller family, with just Marietta, Josie, and Daisy. All the other daughters have married and moved on. In this picture, the 3 women, Josie, Marietta, and Daisy, are in their front yard. This is their home on Hansel Street. They later had a home on Locust Street, where they stayed for the majority of the time in Marietta. But this Hansel Street photo is significant because it is the last photo of the 3 generations of women together. Marietta Bradberry died a few years later, in 1917. Here's the next census in 1920, but now Josie is the head of the household and Daisy is listed as her daughter. But the story doesn't end here. Daisy, a few years later, married Melvin Green Richardson, a man from Marietta, a widower. Here's a picture of Melvin, looking about as happy as anybody ever did in old photographs like this. They were married at Daisy's home on Locust Street, and then they took off for a honeymoon in Florida. Wow, sounds romantic. But I'm not so sure about that. And I'm not sure they ever really lived together. In fact, this is the only thing I've found that puts them in the same place at the same time. It indicates that Mr. and Mrs. M.G. Richardson lived on Cherokee Street in Marietta. 2 years after the wedding, Daisy was ill. And who was she with? Her mother on Locust Street. 8 years after the wedding, in 1930, the census form shows Daisy listed as Daisy Richardson, but she's living with her mom, Josie. And also in the 1930s, Melvin Green Richardson died, suddenly, according to his obituary. And in his obituary, his survivors are listed, and Daisy is not there. And his death certificate states that he is a widower, not married, and that he died of natural causes. This newspaper funeral notice lists his friends and his relatives, but his wife Daisy is not mentioned. So, what can we make of this? Daisy and her mother, Josie, are living together, and they will continue to live together until they both die. We can verify this by census data, newspaper articles, and also by death notices. Josie Bradberry died in 1944. She's identified as Mrs. Bradberry. And that makes sense for the times, I think, because she did have a daughter, and her daughter Daisy is listed here. And regarding Daisy, she passed away in 1954. This is her funeral notice, and she's also listed as the widow of the late Melvin Richardson. And a final sad note about Daisy. It looks like the funeral home had to make a legal filing to be reimbursed for Daisy's funeral expenses. And maybe that answers the question about why her date of death was never added to the grave marker. Daisy is buried with her family in the Marietta City Cemetery. And so, that's about all I know about Daisy Bradberry. If anyone out there knows more or has photographs, please let me know.